Who is ready for an entire month of bike racing at the very highest level?
Yes!
Good, that's the answer we were looking for, and we don't have long to wait. The men's Tour de France kicks off on Saturday, 1st of July in the Basque Country and concludes on the same day that the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift commences on Sunday, the 23rd.
Both races are, of course, available to watch live and on demand on GCN+, although territory restrictions do apply. This year, we're once again joining up with the Tour de France Club to bring you a show that builds up to the biggest month in cycling.
Coming up, a recap of the amazing racing we've had already this season, a look back to last year's Tour de France, and an analysis of who's looking hot and not coming into this year's race. Plus, we'll be answering a few of the questions you sent in last week.
But just before we get onto all of that, we've got an offer for you. We'll be talking about the full range of benefits of being a Tour de France Club member a little later in this video, but this year, club members based in specific markets are going to be able to take advantage of a 20% discount code for GCN+. So please head over to gcn.eu/TDF Club to check if this applies to you, and if it does, to take advantage of the special offer.
Right, let's look back at what's happened so far in 2023.
This has just been a prelude. We've started properly now. It's Paris-Nice, the race to the sun. Medellin is there, Medellin, majestic. No avoiding each other here. The first GC royalty battle since the Tour de France. And it's Tadej Pogačar on debut in Paris-Nice, who puts on a demonstration. It's all happening. It's kicking off at Paris-Nice.
Nouvelle attaque de David Gaudu.
It's Pogačar, it's Gaudu, and it is Vingegaard. We've arrived. It's the final day. Paris-Nice. Tadej Pogačar is riding away from the rest. Finish line in sight then. He's done it again. Tadej Pogačar wins Paris-Nice and is now Prince of the Promenade des Anglais. It's Pogačar 1, Vingegaard 0.
Here comes Evenepoel on the barriers as well. Looks like Roglic. Is it going to be? Is it going to be the one? Oh, only just.
Andiamo Giulio. Andiamo Ciccone. Impresa di Giulio Ciccone che.
Evenepoel delivers battle plan number 1. 2 seconds he gives away, plus the bonus, that's 6. Oh, I think Gravesy got it on the throw. My life, that was close. He can't do it, he can't follow, and Roglic said, this mountain is mine, catch me if you can, and today you cannot. Evenepoel it is that takes the final stage, but Primož Roglic is our champion.
Sprinting it out, Ragusa, Duval trying to get on toes, but it's Alison Jackson who takes the victory for Canada. Alison Jackson, dream finish for EF Education, Tivco.
La chute de Van de Gelgod et Wout van Aert qui va attaquer.
Now Wout van Aert launches. It's all happened in the blink of an eye. It's a flat back tyre for Wout van Aert, and Mathieu van der Poel's going to ride away. Mathieu van der Poel wins the fastest ever Paris-Roubaix.
Has Lippert got anything left now to try and come back here on the Mur de Huy? Demi Vollering adds La Flèche Wallonne to the Amstel Gold Classic that she won on Sunday.
The Slovenian megastar of our sport, Tadej Pogačar. Well, absolutely imperious at Amstel, brilliant at Flèche. What has he got left for Liège?
Tadej Pogačar has crashed.
Not so good news. He have a multiple fracture to the left wrist. He will be operated right now directly in the hospital of Genk by a hand specialist.
And now Evenepoel goes. The finish line is now in sight after another demonstration. Remco Evenepoel, in just his second appearance at Liège-Bastogne-Liège, wins again.
Demi Vollering, the rider now that is riding clear of this chasing group. Longo Borghini as Vollering now tries to fight back. Longo Borghini and Vollering is Vollering going to do the triple. Yes, she is. Demi Vollering does the triple.
Laporte qui revient sur Rune Ergos, Laporte qui passe et Christophe Laporte qui remporte cette première étape et va chercher le maillot jaune.
He's going to go down the centre of the road. Is Alaphilippe going to get there in the end? Oh, that's fabulous! And that's great for Alaphilippe. It's great for the race. It's great for cycling.
Christophe Laporte, Laporte. La victoire de Christophe Laporte. Deuxième victoire sur ce critérium du Dauphiné.
Michael Pierre, nouveau leader du classement général.
Time trial yesterday disappointed. Today belongs to him. And so does this title, surely.
Der Sieg für Georg Zimmermann auf dieser 6. Etappe der Dauphiné verdient.
The rain has come down at the very last, but it does not diminish the brightness of his performance and indeed the fizz of that yellow and blue jersey.
Bravo Giulio, andiamo, bisogna rischiare se vogliamo vincere.
Ciccone comes home, kapow! Brilliant, the breakaway makes it, and now we face the man who has controlled this race. He's won not the stage, but of course the entire race. Chapeau to Vingegaard.
When you look back at all the action from this year already, it's almost hard to believe that we've got the best yet to come, isn't it? What was your favourite moments of the races that we've just seen there?
Oh, so many good moments, such a tough one. I think it's going to have to be the Paris-Roubaix weekend as a whole. I love how that race throws up surprises, surprise winners, Alison Jackson winning the women's race. I think the only thing that would have made that weekend's topped it all off would have been if Wout van Aert didn't puncture on Carrefour de l'Arbre.
I know. I still feel devastated for him, even 2 months on from that race.
Gutted.
Now, as promised, we're going to run you through the many benefits of joining the Tour de France Club, which we should also point out is completely free.
Firstly, what's new this year? Well, there is a brand new interactive race centre, which you'll only be able to access if you're a club member.
Yeah, this is a really big one for me, the race centre. You just can't have enough cameras in a bike race to show you everything that's going on in that race. So extra info like that really is priceless. You'll be able to see where your favourite rider is on the road or have an overall view. It's incredibly useful, as is the race radio. That's actually something that we've had in the past at the Tour de France when we're commentating on the race. And race radio enables you to find out if someone's had a crash or a mechanical problem away from the cameras. So it's really helping us to keep on top of everything that's going on. And you can do it too as a club member.
Absolutely. It'll also be the Tour de France club members who vote to decide which riders are awarded the Combativity Award for each stage. Plus, you'll get a daily stage preview from a Tour de France expert through Strava. And often, that's one of the sports directors, so a true expert to let you know what the riders have to deal with and what might happen.
There are also some amazing prizes up for grabs this year. Too many to mention all of them, but amongst them, tickets to go and watch the final stage on the Champs-Élysées in Paris.
Not bad.
Cool is that? And this next one I think is even cooler. So the first time ever this year, there is going to be one place every day in the Tour de France fan car which is going to follow the stage around. That would be an incredible experience.
What an experience that would be. You can sign up for all of this either on the TDF Club app or on their website. Okay, before we take a look at what there is to look forward to at this year's Tour de France, let's remind ourselves of how they unfolded last year.
The rain fell on the peloton in the opening time trial as we saw Belgian Yves Lampaert power to an emotional yellow.
I'm just a farm son from Belgium.
Having taken the yellow with a second place on stage 2, it was Wout van Aert's turn to spread his wings and celebrate a breakaway win on stage 4. A familiar face rose to the top of the pack on stage 6 as Tadej Pogačar outsprinted his rivals. It was all smiles for the defending champion on stage 11, but was this a bluff? Jumbo-Visma's Jonas Vingegaard blew Pogačar away on the Col de Granon. The final day in the Pyrenees was Pogačar's last chance.
Pogačar down, it's he who loses control.
He crashed, but his rival graciously waited for him to catch up. So Jonas Vingegaard wore the final yellow jersey over the finish line in Paris, becoming the first Dane to win the Tour since 1996. Earlier that day, Lorena Wiebes wrote her name into history on the Champs-Élysées as the first ever maillot jaune of the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift. The GOAT, the boss, Marianne Vos took control in the crosswinds on stage 2 and carried that yellow jersey until the final weekend, adding another victory on stage 6. Annemiek van Vleuten had been struggling with sickness, but recovered in time for the high mountains, taking back-to-back wins on stage 7 and stage 8, in yellow on top of Planche de Belfi.
So in the end, after some brilliant racing, 2 dominant wins there for Jonas Vingegaard and Annemiek van Vleuten. But whilst the Dane has shown that he's on track to repeat his victory, Van Vleuten, she's not been out-climbing and out-powering everybody else as she has done in the past this year.
She hasn't, and it might be a bit of a worry for her, but it could make for some thrilling watching for neutral viewers. More on that later, but we'll start with the race that comes first. Like you say, Vingegaard has shown at the Dauphiné that he's more than ready for July, but with Pogačar and that wrist injury, you just never know, do you?
We don't, but what we do know is that Pogačar's done 19 days of racing so far this year and won 12. I mean, I don't think there's any other rider in the modern era that's come close to a strike rate like that. So if his wrist is okay, he will be okay, I reckon. Quite frankly, though, we really need him to be at his very best, I think, for the Tour de France, just for entertainment's sake.
Agreed. Those 2 are the big favourites. Either way, others who could or should be looking for a podium spot are Mas, O'Connor, Hindley making his race debut, plus teammate Vlasov, Gaudu, Carapaz, Landa, Simon Yates, and his brother Adam, depending on what freedom he gets. It's safe to say, though, the aforementioned riders have been performing better than others in recent weeks.
Yeah, there's been quite the spread of form when you look back at the Tour de Suisse and the Dauphiné, hasn't there? Probably also worth mentioning Matthias Skjelmoser, talking about the Tour de Suisse. That was a fantastic win for the Dane there. We should also talk about one of the just 3 former winners that we think will be on the start line, Egan Bernal. It's going to be very interesting to see how he, and indeed the whole of the Ineos Grenadiers, perform in July.
Let's hope he's on top form, but we'll take a deeper dive into the favourites on our big Tour de France preview show out next week. Back to the women then, and whilst Annemiek van Vleuten won the Vuelta in May, that came off the back of splitting the peloton in crosswinds, slightly controversial, many of you will remember, rather than blitzing it up the climbs.
And from what we've seen so far this year, you've got to say, Demi Vollering of SD Worx will surely start that race as the big favourite. As we record this, she's won 12 races so far this season, which doubles those that she amassed in the first 5 years of her professional career, whilst Van Vleuten's only had that one, albeit quite a big one, the GC win at the Vuelta.
Quite a big one. Yeah. Nuvia Doma, Le Bus, Persico, Longo Borghini, Ludwig, Musique, Ewers and Garcia were the other riders who rounded out the top 10 last year. And all being well, I think they'll be back right there this year.
Hopefully, yes. There'll be a lot of people looking for a podium place, won't there? The one rider I'm really looking forward to watching, though, is Gaia Riolini. Yeah. I think she's been the revelation of the season on the women's side so far this year. Will she get a free roll at Trek Segafredo, or Little Trek, as it's going to be known in July? I really hope that she will. And we've also got Lizzie Deignan presumably making a return. Well, the first time actually she's done Tour de France Femmes.
No, it is.
Zwift.
Do you think she can challenge for the GC?
I wouldn't have thought, I mean, I wouldn't write her off completely, but I would imagine stage victories and then helping her teammates on the GC would be how she plays it this time around.
Either way, an exciting team for Little Trek. Now, one part of the Tour de France club that we haven't mentioned so far is their fantasy league.
Yeah, and you are a bit of a fantasy league expert.
I do like to dabble. I do like to dabble, I must say.
So try and beat Joe, I dare you. Anyway, the rules for the Tour de France Fantasy League are as follows. You have to pick 8 riders ahead of the start from 4 different categories, they being leader, sprinter, climber or rouleur. And now, of course, there is a budget that you have to keep to, but you can pick one of your choices as a stage winner bonus. And what that means is that the points that they gain on each stage will be doubled and added to your tally.
Points are gained through stage position, current mountains or points ranking, top placings over the classified climbs, and most combative riders. At the end, GC will be added along with all the other rankings into the other sub-competitions.
Now, you are allowed to make substitutions, actually, if one of your riders doesn't take to the start of a particular stage, or by using up some of your credits, which you can earn. So more details on that and the rest of the Fantasy League are available, of course, on the Tour de France Club website. Next up then, let's talk about some key stages rather than going through all 29 of them. We've picked out 4 that you have to put in your diary, and we're going to start with the one that kicked it all off. Saturday the 1st of July, stage 1 of the men's Tour de France, starting and finishing in Bilbao in the Basque Country.
I can't remember the last time the Tour de France opened with a stage that included a second category climb and a total of almost 3,500 metres of climbing. There are 5 categorised climbs in total. The last one is a short but very steep and comes with just 10k to go down.
And there's a ramp towards the finish of 5% as well, isn't it? So it's a stage that's open to a lot of different types of riders and to so many different eventualities. And there's no doubt at all it's going to be a very nervous day for everyone. We were looking back at 2021 in the opening stage, the Alaphilippe one, and you said 2,900 metres of climbing that day,
Certainly
over
less.
198k.
Yeah.
So this is a really tough start.
Really fiery one.
Isn't it? And in fact, the first week of this tour is the hardest that I can ever remember, with the Col du Tourmalet coming on stage 6. That one is nearly, but not quite, the highest point of this year's race. But our next stage to watch is not that one, although I do suggest you do watch it, but it comes 3 days afterwards.
That's right, stage 9, Sunday, 9th of July. And we've chosen this one because it finishes on the Puy de Dôme for the first time in 35 years. 13.3 kilometres at just under 8%, but the final 4.5k are all over 11%. It's going to be a brutal finish, harder than the Planche de Belfi, I reckon.
Stats seem to suggest that, don't they? I used to live near the Puy de Dôme.
Yeah?
In fact, I could pretty much see it from the railway station I lived in.
Climb it often?
Disused No, I never went up it because I was so lazy at the time in terms of sight because it didn't get up early enough because you had to get up it and down it by 8 in the morning.
Right.
I think it was, and so I wanted to rest and recover.
I imagine the percentages probably had something to do with that as well.
I just chose the flatter roads.
Yeah.
Anyway, next up, stage 20, which is the penultimate day, of course, of the race, and we've chosen this one basically because it's the final chance for the GC to change. Now, the climbs that litter the day, they're not the most well-known, the most famous, or the most historic from the Tour de France, but there are 6 of them, and they account for over 3,500 metres of climbing in the space of just 130 kilometres. That day will finish in Le Markstein.
All being well, there'll be fireworks that day. Let's hope so anyway.
Yes.
Stage 7 of the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift is going to be a huge day in the GC. And this one does have 2 very recognisable climbs, the Col d'Aspan, followed by the Col de Tourmalet. Far harder, I think, than anything we saw at last year's race.
It feels that way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's another short stage, at least distance-wise, at just 90 kilometres. So make sure you don't miss it, Saturday the 29th of July.
Yeah.
Right, in a few moments, we will be answering a few questions that were sent in to us on the Tour de France Club website. But just before that, we wanted to let you all know about a documentary we released a couple of weeks ago on GCN+. It is entitled Froome, Back in Africa.
We followed him as he competed at the Tour de Rwanda back in February this year. Here's a sneak peek.
I do sort of pinch myself, thinking I'm here racing in Africa again. It is a pretty special feeling, having obviously grown up in East Africa. I've done full circle. It's been a long road back for me since that big crash.
When I saw the crash, I actually thought, this is it. He's not going to make it.
There were dark periods. I definitely wanted to set an example to my kids. This is how you work through something.
Chris, take the gel.
Yeah, thanks.
Coming to a new team 1 year after the crash, it came at a time that it almost did sort of, for me, signify a new beginning.
Good luck, guys. We'll see you on the road.
I'm still motivated. I'm hoping to find my former self again.
And Chris Froome makes a move off the front.
If I can keep seeing progression and getting closer to that goal of that dream of being back on the podium of the Tour de France, then that would make me a very happy man.
It was great he gave us so much access to himself that week, wasn't it, in Rwanda? That one's available for all GCN Plus subscribers to watch now if you would like to see the whole thing. Right, time to get on some member questions, and we'll start with one that was sent in by Christophe.
Let's do it.
What can we expect from our 3 Frenchies, Gaudu, Pinot and Bardet? And I would assume that Christophe is French.
Yeah.
He's talking about his own countrymen there.
Well, obviously Gaudu and Pinot are on the same team. I think Gaudu will be the GC leader for Groupama FDJ. Pinot,
Wasn't great in the Dauphiné though, was he?
He wasn't, but 4th last year at the Tour. I think that will take precedent over that. And for Thibaut, obviously his last Tour de France, I think a stage win for him would send the whole nation into a frenzy. Bardet, what do you think he can do?
Well, I think of all three of those, Bardet is the most guaranteed to have a solid performance from start to finish. He just seems to be a bit more predictable. And doesn't have the big off days that the other two sometimes have. Whether or not he'll want to go for a top 10 on GC, because I can't see him finishing on the podium, or just focus on stage wins and or the KOM jersey. I think that's probably a tough decision for him to make. Because all these GC riders, it's so alien to them in the first part of the race to deliberately fall out of the GC.
And of course, Bardet, a rider who's finished on the podium before, does he settle for a top 10 place, or does he drop back, like you say, and go for a big stage win?
Yeah, I really hope for all of them that they pull out big rides at this Tour de France. So important for the French public and for the race as a whole. Right, on to this one from Estelle. To you, what is your favourite and most iconic moment ever from the Tour de France?
I mean, in recent history, you'd have to say the 2020 Tour, stage 20.
You can't nick that. That's the one I was going to have.
It's just the iconic moment of the last decade to me, really. I mean, the arrival of Pogacar, looking back, it really feels like. Yours as well, or have you got a different one?
Yeah. I was going to say the same thing. I mean, I will never forget watching it in disbelief, and also with the feeling of I'm watching some kind of historical moment at this point. You know, Roglic almost guaranteed it felt to take the overall victory, and then snatched from a monstrous Tadej Pogacar that day. It was unbelievable. Yeah. I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
No, I mean, still difficult to believe it looking back. I mean, maybe more so now. We've seen what Pogacar has gone on to do. What was it, 12 wins in 19 race days so far this season.
It's more believable now, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on then, a question from Liam now. Have all tactical decisions now moved from the team car to the rider radios, or can the team still make decisions on the roads tactically?
It's an interesting subject, this one, because I think that there are a lot of people out there that think that the team car's television is completely live, and it is far from live. It can be a long way behind. It's going to be at least 10 seconds, normally probably 20 or 30 seconds behind. So it's not as though they can see something that's happening in a breakaway that's only a handful of seconds up the road and tell their riders what's coming up. So yes, there will be a lot of decisions made by the team that aren't riding the race, but the personnel behind everything. But it's still really important, I think, to have a team captain that's able to make real snap decisions out on the road and take charge of the team, even if it's not one of the best riders within it. I think Luke Rowe is a classic example of that, isn't it? He's such a good team captain out on the road. And I think invaluable for teams to have a rider like that in their ranks, that the rest believe in and the rest will follow, etc.
Yeah, and I guess the stage is sometimes 200 kilometres, but decided in a moment, and rider instinct is always going to have its role to play in cycling.
Exactly. We had a message come in from Doug as well, asking which American rider has the best chance of a podium finish in the general classification.
Well, I think on the men's side, we'll start there. I think it's going to be tough, firstly, for an American rider to be on the podium this year. Matteo Jorgensen, though, has really shone. I think he did really well at Paris-Nice, and he also won the Tour of Oman.
He's been brilliant
earlier this year. A podium probably a step too far, do you think, for him this year?
It feels like, it definitely feels like he is on the right trajectory. And I think he could potentially finish on the podium in the future. But he's one of those riders that's still yet to really find which part he needs to focus on. Maybe he doesn't need to focus on one thing, because he seems to be very good at a lot of things right now.
He's so well-rounded. Yeah. He really is. And on the women's side, I think...
It was Veronica Ewers, wasn't it, we read out earlier. She was top 10 last year. Again, I think it might be a little bit too big of a step for her to get onto the final podium, but certainly she hoped to replicate that top 10 from last year. So right now, chance of an American podium placing at the Tour de France, I think quite slim, but things are starting to look pretty good for the future of the American side of the sport and cycling.
Absolutely. Crazier things have happened. Okay. Moving on now, a question from John. Who are your favourites to win the KOM or polka dot jersey?
It's such a hard one to predict, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Because often the KOM jersey at the Tour de France is won by someone that's fallen out of the GC for whatever reason that might be. And so you wouldn't pick one of the GC riders right now, because you're assuming that they're going to focus so much on GC, they won't be up the road in breakaways picking up loads of points. I mean, we've already spoken about Pinot. I'd imagine he won't be going for GC and would love to take the Tour de France KOM jersey.
And that would mean Giro and Tour.
Yeah, that'd be quite
in the same year.
Yeah, because the Giro one was the first for years that he'd taken, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Who do you reckon?
Oh, it's a tough one. I think, would it be crazy to say Pogacar? I mean, the yellow jersey often has won it.
Well, that is very true.
So
yeah, he's won it twice, hasn't he?
And it depends, I guess, how many of those stages do go to the breakaway, because we've seen, particularly I think with Pogacar and Vingegaard, they really want to accumulate as many stage wins as possible. They set their team on the front, control the breakaway. So if I had to say now, I would say Pogačar. Not a very exciting answer, but
no, but could well happen, couldn't it? Next question then comes in from Ivan, who said, who are the fastest sprinters at the Tour de France this year?
I think Jasper Philipsen is probably the sprinter to watch for me. I mean, there's so many though. Wout van Aert, Fabio Jakobsen going instead of Tim Merlier this year. Anyone else?
Well, it's Caleb Ewan, isn't there? But he really seems to struggle with positioning, or at least just having the chance to fight for the victory in the last 200 metres. When he does get there, he's often quite fast. We have made an omission though.
We have.
Yeah. Mark Cavendish.
Mark Cavendish, 34 wins and counting. Can he get that elusive stage win, do you think?
Well, I'd love to see it. I mean, I'm almost reluctant to give my opinion just because every time I give it, it's completely wrong. You know, I might say, yeah, he can do it, and then he's just nowhere on every single one of the sprint stages. Or I might say, just seems a little bit past it at this point compared to the likes of Jakobsen and Philipsen. And all of a sudden he springs out of the bunch like he did on the last stage of the Giro d'Italia and takes an emphatic stage victory.
And
but either way, I'd love to see it.
I think everyone, or almost everyone watching, would absolutely love to see it.
Maybe even Jakobsen and Philipsen would be quite pleased for him, I think, even though they want to win themselves. Of course.
Okay, next up, a question from Rich. And what width of tyres, tyre pressures, and tube or tubeless does the typical Tour de France rider use nowadays, Dan?
It has changed massively. In fact, Ollie Bridgewood went over to the Giro d'Italia and looked at exactly this. Almost every team now is riding tubeless. If you want to know what that means, there's no inner tubes. I mean, it's fairly obvious, but they're like clincher tyres that seal onto the rim, and so you don't have the need for inner tubes. So they've got sealant in there in case the tyre punctures. You can often seal the puncture there. If you only go back 4 or 5 years, everybody on tubeless, but at the Giro d'Italia, it was only Iola Cometa who were still using tubeless tyres, or tubular tyres, should I say. But the width and the pressures also changed massively as well. Back in my day, quite some time ago now, just over a decade, but it was always 25s for road stages. Now, the average, I would say, is 28, and quite often they're up to 30mm width tyres at anything from sort of 65 to 85, 90 PSI, which again is a lot less, but when you've got a bigger volume, you don't need as much pressure in your tyres. It's like car tyres, basically. Reason for this is mainly rolling resistance. You know, lots of rolling resistance studies have been done and proving that tubeless tyres roll a lot quicker if you've got the correct ones than the old tubular technology that was used for donkey's years before things changed fairly recently. So it's quite an interesting update. The other thing that's allowed them to use the wider tyres is a change in the forks and the design of the frame, but also the wheels. That's the most important thing. The wheels are now much wider, because before, if you put a 30mm tyre onto the width of rim that we used to have, it's such a bulbous thing at the front, it was not aerodynamic whatsoever. Because the rims are so much wider, the air still circulates over the top of the tyre, and it's more aerodynamic, I think, than it even was before. So yeah, it's been a massive change, and I think it's made a big difference to the speed of the riders these days.
Absolutely. All about those extra watts.
Exactly,
extra speed.
Marginal gains.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that pretty much brings us to the end of our Tour de France Club video. Thanks for sending all your questions in, and sorry if we couldn't quite answer them all.
Yes, don't forget, you can watch the Tour de France and Tour de France Femmes live and on demand this July on GCN+ if you're in the right territory. And one more reminder that joining the Tour de France Club with all of its benefits and competition prizes up for grabs is absolutely free.
Join us next week for our big GCN Tour de France preview show, which will come out just as soon as the teams confirm their lineups.
It's so close to the start now, isn't it? We cannot wait until the Grand Départ in Bilbao in the Basque Country. For now, though, it's goodbye.